Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Elisa Ruffin with Leading Educators, and you are on the Grade 11 ELA Unit 6 lesson video series. We are in Week 8, and we're on Lesson 38, our last lesson with the text House Painting. So far this week, you've completed a first read and annotations in 2 parts on days 1 and 2 and responded to questions. On day 3, you did a close read, some annotations, and a quick write. And then yesterday, day 4, you began your analysis of the text by responding to some questions, evaluating the character's thoughts, behaviors, emotions, and actions, and giving your opinions on some things, which I know you have been itching to do. Today, we wade in the deep waters of analyzing craft and structure, specifically focused on point of view and reflecting on the neglected character Way. So that's going to be a really interesting conversation. Before we get into it, though, let's make sure that you remember when you are done with the lesson activities for today, you still need to share your learning with a family member, caregiver, or friend. You still need to complete the weekly fluency activity using a page from the text and do an additional 20 minutes of reading from a text of your choice. Before we go any further, though, we have this last order of business of the riddle of the day. And as you know, we started with riddle poetry this week. A lot more challenging than some of the riddles that we've been doing, but hopefully you've enjoyed them. And hopefully you've been working feverishly trying to figure out what those answers are. This one is another doozy, so I do plan on giving you some very specific coaching and ideas. Spoiler alert, if you're someone that does not want clues, then you're just going to want to listen to the first part of me reading through things and then pausing it, so that you won't get that kind of verbal explanation of things. In the meantime, gather everyone around who has been a part of this and wants to be a part of this challenge. And if it's just you, because you like the individual challenge, then get your mind right, because here we go. Our last riddle poem for this week. We are little airy creatures, all of different voice and features. One of us is in glass, is set. One of us you'll find in jet, the other you may see in tin, and the fourth a box within. If the fifth you should pursue, it can never fly from you. This particular riddle is by Jonathan Swift, but what is the answer? We are little airy creatures, all of different voice and features. One of us in glass is set. One of us you'll find in jet, the other you may see in tin, and the fourth a box within. If the fifth you should pursue, it can never fly from you. If you don't want a spoiler, no coaching, pause right here, because I'm about to give you some direction, folks. Okay, here we go. So as you'll notice, I've highlighted some words here, and that's because much like the riddle poem from a couple of days ago, remember the double O, the igloo and the moon, etc. And I told you, instead of thinking about the word and the objects that the word represent, think about the words themselves. All right. So see this as a riddle poem that's describing the words themselves, literally, not the objects the word represents. Okay. So if you use that same thinking from the poem a couple days ago with this, it's a key, a template for you to unlock this one. So with that being said, let's look at the highlighted words. One of us is in glass, not a tangible glass, but in the word glass. One of us you'll find in jet, the other you may see in tin, and the fourth a box within. If the fifth you should pursue, it can never fly from you. So instead of thinking about the highlighted words as objects, just examine the words using the directions from the lines, and you may get it. You're welcome. All right, so I'm going to pause for a minute, give you a chance to think. You may now already know the answer. The answer to this riddle, our final one of the week. Vowels. Vowels. What are the vowels, folks? A, E, I, O, and U. Glass. One of us is in glass. There's the A, E in jet, I in tin, O in box, and what? U at the end of U. There you go. A, E, I, O, U. Some English humor for you, ladies and gentlemen. All right, let's make sure we have our materials for today now that we're all warmed up. You need the house painting text. You need your learning packet. Week 8, Lesson 38, note catcher, a pen or pencil. And remember, a smartphone, a device, or mobile device is optional if you'd like to access the text digitally. Our author, Lan Samantha Chang. This is a narrative fictional short story, and it's focused on the idea of duty and desire and expectation and duty. What do stories reveal about the human condition? You talked about that yesterday and its overall connection to the text, our essential question for the unit. And then our guiding question is what I just mentioned. How do people manage conflict between duty and desire? That is the challenge that one of our main characters faces head on. Our learning target for today. I can explain how the author's choice of narrator helps develop the plots, characters, and themes of the story. So remember, author's craft and structure here, taking off that reader's lens and putting on the what? Your writer's lens. So we're going to be examining some of the choices that the author makes and the impact or the effects of those choices on the overall plot. So specifically, we're focusing on point of view. And you did some point of view with the Telltale Heart last week, so you should be more than prepared to do it and apply those same skills here to house painting. You are going to do your read, think, talk, write routine as usual and close with the wrap-up activity. You're going to skim through the text again, house painting. And when you're thinking, you're going to be thinking about these two questions. How does reading the story from Annie, who's the younger sister, Annie's point of view, impact the story overall? Why do you think the author chose to tell the story from Annie's point of view instead of Francis's? This is a really interesting question, which we will revisit. You're going to talk with a family member, caregiver, or friend about the following question. Why do you think the author chose the title House Painting for the story? Explain. Provide evidence from the text and record it in the note catcher. Then you're going to move on to the right section. You're going to provide examples from the text to support your answers to the questions in the think section, which I will model for you. And then closing, we're going to call this activity, what about Way? What do you think Way is thinking and feeling about all of this? We spent a lot of time talking about Frances and her interactions with her mom, dad, and sister. But what about Way? He's a critical part of the story as well, but we don't know what he's thinking or feeling. So what do you speculate he's thinking or feeling? You're going to get a chance to divulge that in the closing section. Now that we have an overview of our activities for today, let's jump in on our quick model so that you all can get going. We're going to go straight through because one activity builds on the other again, and that momentum will carry you through, making sure that you're really effective and efficient with your time. Let's start with the think section. 2 questions here. How does reading the story from Annie's, the younger sister's, point of view impact the story? So I need to think about what information and insight Annie has that she passes on to the reader. We've done this with several other stories before. I also need to consider what information I would miss out on if she did not tell the story. And I also need to think about what information I don't have because another character isn't narrating. So there are pros and cons to which person tells the story, who the actual narrator is. So there's some insight I have because Annie is telling the story, right? Because she overhears conversations, for example, between Frances and her mother. She gets to examine Frances and Way's interactions from a third-party perspective, so she's not in it. And she also gets to examine how her family interacts as well. So she really is kind of standing outside of things and examining what's going on, and at the same time has some inside information that the reader would not have without her. Also, there's some things that she can only speculate about because she herself isn't involved. So while there are pros, there's also limitations to her perspective, right? So while she can overhear how Frances feels, she doesn't know what Way feels. She can only make observations. She doesn't know exactly her parents' intentions. She can only listen, observe, and interpret, right? So there's limitations to point of view perspectives as well. So now that we've fleshed all that out, think about how does reading the story from Annie's perspective impact the story itself? So if you keep all of those things in mind that I just mentioned, you should really be able to address that question fully. And then, why do you think the author chose to tell the story from Annie's point of view instead of Frances? Your answer to the first question will inevitably lead you to an answer to the second question. An author is looking to communicate or to a particular theme or idea. And when an author chooses a point of view, it's because it serves a purpose. And so understanding what the ideas related to the theme and the messaging of the story connected to the point of view can help you determine the answer to the second question, right? So now that you know what the theme and the message of the story is, how does Annie being the narrator help support that or advance that theme? Moving on to the talk section, with your family member, caregiver, or friend, talk about the following question. Why do you think the author chose the title House Painting for the story? Explain and provide evidence from the text. You have had practiced with this idea of titles before. Remember, in our previous text, The Telltale Heart, you had to come up with your own title. And we talked about some different ways in which titles come about for pieces of literature. Sometimes it's named after a character. Sometimes it's connected to theme. Sometimes it's a line that's spoken in the story. Sometimes it's related to an action. Any of those reasons and a myriad of others is how titles come to be. Okay, so your task is to think through why the author, this particular author, Lan Samantha Chang, chose house painting as the story title. My suggestion to kind of clue you in on some things is to review your responses and annotations related to symbolism in the text. That is going to give you some clues and insight into why this author would choose to name the story House Painting. It's wrapped up in the idea of symbolism, okay? So if you've already wrestled with successfully the idea of symbolism, you should be able to address why you believe the title of the story is House Painting. Make sure that once you come up with your explanation that you can justify and support the explanation using evidence from the text. Okay, so that's the talk section. Moving on to the write section, remember you're providing examples from the text to support your answer, which we just kind of talked through. So you should be ready for that. Your closing section, what about Wei? I think you're going to enjoy doing this. All right. What do you think Wei is thinking and feeling? So you get to speculate a bit here. You're going to provide examples from the text to support your answer. So you're not just having these kind of baseless speculations here, meaning you're just kind of pulling them out of thin air and your imagination. As always, it needs to be anchored in the text. So even though there's not explicitly discussed about Wei's thoughts and feelings, because Annie doesn't know what his thoughts and feelings are, she can only make observations, and Wei isn't the narrator. So we're just going to have to pick up clues, right? So we're like a detective here, picking up clues from what we read in the dialogue, what we observe by way of the descriptions related to the behavior on his interactions, and what he's doing, and then come up with what we think he may be thinking. So we think about what Wei hears, sees, and experiences through the story, and that's a good place to start. And we can also examine his behaviors in light of his experiences. Is it possible he feels just like Francis does? Is that a possibility? All right, so keep that in mind. Now that we've modeled all of your responses here, as well as what you should be doing in the write and closing section, it is your turn to read, think, talk, and write. Remember, you're skimming through the text again. You are considering how does reading the story from Annie's perspective and point of view impact the overall plot? Why do you think the author chose to tell the story from her point of view? And then you're talking through why you think the author chose the title House Painting for the story. So you're going to grapple with symbolism again, going back to your previous notes. You're going to provide some support from the text in the write section based on your answers. And then you're going to close with the activity, what about Wei? What do you think Wei is thinking and feeling? And you're going to provide answers from the text to support your point of view there. And then I want you to share that with a family member, caregiver, or friend and see if they agree with you, and record your answers in the appropriate section in the note catcher. If you get stuck in any way, shape, or form, remember you can pause and replay this video as often as you'd like to help kind of coach you through and guide you through this process. If in replaying the video you still need additional help, you are welcome to reach out to a teacher for some support using the email structure provided for you there. And then when you're done, remember that you share your learning with a family member, caregiver, or friend, that you complete the weekly fluency activity using a page from the text, and you do at least 20 minutes of additional reading a day from a text of your choice, something that you like to do for leisure. All right, folks, you have successfully made it through another week's worth of lessons and wrapped up another text. So you've got another story under your belt here. Well done. Please make sure that you don't forget those 3 activities that you do when you're done with those lesson activities. And I'll see you back here next time for another text and another set of awesome activities. Have a good one.